We have public comment this morning, so I want to get started. And we have good, it looks like a quorum is already present for our meeting today. So Mary Margaret Weber Wheeler is here to present to us this morning.
Hi, thank you so much. Good morning. Yeah, my name is Mary Margaret Wheeler Weber. I'm Vice Chair of the Portsmouth Neighborhood Association and one of many people who advocated for continuous access to indoor swimming on the North Portland Peninsula after the city announced the planned closure of Columbia Pool. And I'm here, first of all, to thank you all for your work in passing the levy. We're extremely grateful to not have to fight for operation funds for Columbia Pool every year. And we're just grateful for everything it means for our city. And we're also, of course, grateful for everyone who voted for it. Second, for obvious reasons, I think we all really need hope right now. And we're really hopeful that we're going to hear something soon about next steps for long-term aquatics in our community. There was a lot of exciting concepts as well as a lot of despair previously. And so we're just very, very hopeful that we're going to hear something soon. There's a wide range of people who loved and relied on Columbia Pool for fitness and community, including the students at Rosa Parks, young athletes and swim teams, elders staying fit and connected, people living with disabilities, and even kayakers, as well as lots of people who just like to swim and get wet. And somehow Columbia Pool worked for us all. And so we're really counting on parks and everyone else in the city to work with community to know how we can meet all those needs moving forward. And we're hopeful for conversations as well as announcements soon. So thank you again for hearing me today, and thank you for your service.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments?
I'll just note that Mary Margaret and I have exchanged emails recently when I heard that she was coming to the board to speak about the North Portland Aquatic Center. And I assured her that Commissioner Rubio actually has an announcement to make shortly that I think will put her mind at ease. So, you know, more to come. I don't want to disclose the news, but thank you, Mary Margaret, for your advocacy and for nudging us along. I appreciate your support.
Thanks, Adina, for that teaser. We'll look forward to the announcement from the commissioner soon. Okay, so wanted to check in first to start today's meeting, and I thought one way to do that would be sharing, you know, a book, movie, art that has inspired us or just sort of captured our imagination recently. And for me, that was a book by Adam Gopnik. It's called 1,000 Small Sanities. It's basically the history of liberalism, not liberalism as liberalism versus conservatism, but just sort of the history of how we've developed these institutions and how there's been a great loss of faith in our institutions. But it's a really great read, and it's really helped me understand a lot of our struggles currently. So that's what's been on my nightstand recently. And I'm going to ask Brooke to share next what's inspired her recently.
All right. My sister recently shared with me a book of poems. I think it's called What Kind of Woman? I haven't dug into it too deeply, but she shared one poem with me that was very inspiring. And yeah, so check it out.
Great. Thanks, Brooke. Adina, how about you?
I guess I can't hide in the back row and put my head down. I'm drawing a blank, which is unfortunate, and it means that I really need some things in my life that are inspiring. I am reading whatever crap my Kindle tells me to read. I like to read what I refer to as airport novels, because it just sort of numbs my brain. So really nothing inspiring. I'm going on vacation later on this week, so, you know, ask me later.
Okay, well, there's nothing wrong with an airport mystery novel, believe me, so that's perfectly fine. David, how about you?
I just downloaded, I'm so excited to start this. I just downloaded a book called The World's Fastest Man. It's about they're saying America's first Black sports hero, Major Taylor. I didn't know about Major Taylor's history, so I'm really excited to dive into this. It looks like a really good read.
Cool. Yeah, there's a lot of heroes like that are completely under the radar. So
Yeah,
learning
yeah.
about them is always exciting.
Yeah, really excited
Uh,
about it.
Great. Tim, how about for you?
Find the unmute button. So I've been reading a book by David Byrne called How Music Works. And it's been super interesting because not only is there kind of a Talking Heads biography that moves through it, but just talks about the history of music, where it was performed, why certain instruments were valued in certain times in certain places in the world, and how they functioned with the environment around them all through the record industry and changing to kind of digital and home recording. Just super interesting. And who doesn't love David Byrne?
Right. Thank you. Aaron.
Yeah, so I found this show, which I'm really loving. It's actually kind of old. It's from 2018. It's called One Strange Rock. It's from National Geographic. It was directed by Darren Aronofsky, who I don't know if any of you know him, but he's kind of known, he's done a lot of really weird films. So it was interesting to see him partner with National Geographic. But my 5-year-old is very, very interested in science and how the universe started and how the earth started and what the sun is. And I'm like woefully unprepared for her questions. So makes me realize I'm like, the Big Bang, the Big Bang, and I know nothing about it. So this show actually is very relevant. It's a little advanced for her. It's, not made for children, but it's helping me explain things to her. And it's just beautiful filmography. So I've been enjoying that.
That's great. Thanks for sharing that. Ian, how about you?
Good morning, everybody. My wife and I stumbled on to a show called Home on Apple TV Plus, and it sort of tells stories of people who have reimagined homes and what a personal residence could be. And this is going on while my wife and I have been moving ever so slowly along the idea of whether we should redevelop our repurpose our house to make it more ADA accessible, or do the impossible and find a house in Portland that is more ADA accessible, and our house is not very. So it's both hopeful and frustrating, but it's a really cool, interesting show that I would encourage anybody to watch. Thanks.
Thanks, Ian. Bonnie.
Good morning, everyone. So I have to admit, I have failed to read most of the books in my book group that my book group has been reading, but there's one that I was excited to get and I was started to read. And I can tell you basically what it's about, but I haven't actually gotten into it enough to tell you. It's about how exercise helps your brain function. I don't know, maybe Juan can even tell me, isn't that what he does? Pediatric neurology? I don't know. But so absent an actual title.
Yes, I do that and sleep also, sleep.
But absent a title that I can share with y'all, I will do my fallback, which is I will, out of sympathy with and commiserating with Adina, I will fall back to what always inspires me when I don't have a book at the tip of my tongue, which is fall back to a film, because films are so much easier. And for me, that's Hidden Figures. For so many reasons, these women were just, I know there was a little bit of, license taken, but their story is just so amazing. And I think it's so inspiring. And I would love all young people to watch the film. So.
Yeah, that's a great movie. Thank you, Bonnie. Mike, how about for you?
Yeah, I think the last book I read was called The Invention of Nature. And it's a biography of Alexander von Humboldt. And it talks about his influence on his perspectives on nature in general. And I really would recommend it pretty highly to anybody.
Cool. Thank you. Casey.
Well, I read Foreign Affairs in the morning, which is really depressing. And I do crossword, I do crossword puzzles at night, so that really isn't all that inspiring. Film I would mention is Sound of Metal, which is lovely. But for something that I watch every day that inspires me, it's my wife, it's Carmen. It's amazing that she continues to work all the time, and she makes sure I'm away from the screen for at least 2 hours a day.
Good stuff. Patty.
Hi, well, first I have to acknowledge Mike's choice of von Humboldt. That book is amazing. It really is. I'm going to portray myself as a complete nerd. I'm reading Harold McGee's Science and Law of Cooking, which is about 1,000 pages of minute detail on the chemistry and physics of cooking. But it's absolutely fascinating.
All right, that sounds fun. Randy.
Sure. I just finished The Committed by Viet Thanh Nguyen. I think that's how you pronounce it. I'm not actually sure. Which is a follow-up to The Sympathizer, and it's just absolutely amazing. Funny and deep dive into Vietnamese culture displaced in France. And it reads like a potboiler mystery, but is amazing sort of cultural deep dive, and then also an amazing sort of self-exploration of somebody who is biracial and feeling displaced. It's just a great book, kind of in the vein of humor of like Tommy Orange. I don't know if any of you have read his book, or Paul Beatty. Just really hilarious stuff. So anyway, highly recommend it. Can't put it down. Couldn't put it down at night.
Thanks, Randy. Tanya.
Good morning, everyone. Something that recently inspired me was the film Nomadland, and that's Frances Norman is the lead. It's based off a book with the same name, and it really, for me, had me thinking for days afterwards just about our country, the beauty of our country. If you watch the film, she travels in a van, starts living in a van after the Great Recession, and her husband has died, and she lost everything, and she starts living in a van and working in parks in the summer. Just beautiful cinematography, and also, I think just sign of the times in terms of how many people we see that are losing what for many generations we have thought of as the American dream, and kind of on the fringe of society, but really the fabric of our society. And so it was profound for me. If you have a chance, I would say watch it.
Thank you. I've heard similar comments from a lot of people. It's on our list, but I haven't gotten there yet. Juan.
Hi, good morning, everybody. So I am in July, I am going on a bikepacking trip to the Steens Mountain in Southeast Oregon. And so I'm reading this book called, I finished it, called Cattle Country from Gilles French. It's about Peter French. As many of you may know, there is a town there called French Glen. And Peter French was the cattle king down there, and how the book is about how they drove cattle from California all the way to this region in Oregon, and how that area was developed. I'm trying to learn more about this crazy place my wife made me move into, and try to get a better appreciation of the land and the natural resources that Oregon has. But also, the book was written in 1960, and it is historically very accurate. But the way they refer they talk about the Native Americans is very, very interesting. It's definitely something that nowadays it's a little off-putting, and the way the Native Americans were treated and segregated. So I've been doing a lot of, I've been reflecting a lot on the role of different people who have lived in this area, and it made me just think about how happy I am that the new Secretary of Interior is a Native American, and how I think that the role of those who have been here for dozens and dozens of generations and the way they connected the land will help us all. And I really am really excited about the future, because reading these books about the past, I mean, I'm not sure that we went the right way. So we need to rectify some things. And I think that the Native Americans will play a huge role in our future. So yeah, very excited about traveling to Southeast Oregon and looking at those that area and seeing the beauty of those mountains. But I highly recommend the book. It's really good.
Thank you, Juan. Vicente.
Thank you. When I want to sit back and relax, I just pick up the PP&R Emergency Handbook, and that's what. No, just kidding. There's a book and a movie. I'm not a cover-to-cover reader. I like to pick up books on occasion, and the one that's been hanging around me is Born a Crime by Trevor Noah. It's a really great book. He's a very hilarious guy, but it's very traumatic situations that he was going through in South Africa during the apartheid, and just growing up in a whole different environment than America, and some of the travails that he faced. It really puts things in perspective with a lot of the things that we go through here in our country. And then the movie that I just watched with my son last night for the first time. I've been trying to get it. I watched it when he was 5. He wasn't ready for it then, but we watched Star Wars. And the one that I watched with him was Revenge of the Sith, because, everybody really cares about Darth Vader. So I just wanted to show how Darth Vader got his start, and he really enjoyed it. I enjoyed it. But Star Wars at large, it's just a movie that has a lot of background meaning to me in terms of, good and evil and decision making. And, so those are the things the book and movie that I've been reading and watching.
Thank you. Jen, how about for you?
Hey, good morning, everybody. So this is going to sound like I'm kissing up, but it's real. I just finished on Sunday How to Be an Anti-Racist by Dr. Ibram Kendi, who's also speaking at PSU tomorrow, and I've heard him speak before. And I will highly recommend the book. It's like a really well researched and documented factual history of how race, really a power structure, came to be and how it plays out. And I think this book should be required reading in high schools, right up there with People's History of the United States by Howard Zinn, which I just also read recently and went, where has this book been? How come I didn't read this in high school? And sent it to my father, who was a high school teacher, to read too.
2 great books. Thank you. Alejandro.
Good morning, everyone. Something inspiring that I'm reading now and just started. It's a book called To Shake the Sleeping Self from Jedediah Jenkins, and it's a memoir, like a young man who travels by bike from Oregon all the way down to Patagonia. And there's a lot of touching on topics of faith and sexuality and privilege and what your calling in life is. So that a few pages in, a few chapters in, and it's so far so good. So hopefully I can fully recommend it at the end. And in relation to that and bikes, and as Vicente was saying, I have a 2-year-old who's somehow became obsessed with the Tour de France. So he likes to watch clips from the race. And it's been very inspiring to see just like a small child just like starting to understand ideas of like teamwork and competition and physical activity and the outdoors. So that's inspiring for me.
Thank you. Pune.
Good morning, everybody. Two books that I've been digging into recently. One is which the author actually spoke at PSU maybe about a year and a half ago. The book's called Land Justice, Reimagining Land, Food, and the Commons in the U.S., in the United States. It's a really great book. It talks about Indigenous folks and their ongoing, land stewardship practices. And there's just a different way of looking at how we conserve and protect land. And then another really great book, I didn't know of this incredible lawyer until about a year ago, Brian Stevenson's book, Just Mercy. It's also a film, but that book really digs into the carceral system, mostly focusing down in the South. But if folks want to dig in a little bit more to what's happening in the news, that's a really great book to understand the carceral system.
Thank you. Todd?
Yeah, many of you probably know Willie Levinson, and he shared a book with me recently called Contested Waters, A Social History of Swimming Pools in America. And it's really interesting. It basically starts in the 19th century, talking about the role of public swimming pools, and goes all the way through the 20th century, talking about the role of race and culture and social norms and development in America. So really good read, getting ready for summer swimming.
Great. Kenya.
Good morning, everyone. I defended my dissertation at the beginning of the year, so I'm not reading anything.
Well deserved.
Yeah, I'm taking like a 6-month break, so I think I'm good on the reading for right now.
Good honesty. Thank you. Claudio.
Yeah, right now I'm actually on just a fiction binge. I need to get away from the nonfiction for a bit, but actually the most recent book that moved me was Braiding Sweetgrass, and I think it's a extraordinary sort of discussion about native ways of being and knowing and connection to nature. And I think that, coming out of it really came up with, been sort of curating a very short list of values that I try and live. And coming out of that one was reciprocity, was just got added to that short list. And it was just a really, really powerful read. So highly recommended.
Thank you. Tamara.
Hi, good morning. I need to be doing 3 different things to be fully distracted from my thoughts. So I haven't been reading a whole lot lately, but I have been listening to a lot of podcasts. And I'll just jump politically reactive to the top because the humor mixed with politics is the only way I've been able to process everything going on. So I definitely recommend that one. Again, it's just a mixture of pop culture and politics and humor. And their last episode was just going through all the things that they did wrong and how they could do it a bit better and bringing on other guests. And that inspired me a little bit just to hear an example of how you can mess up in a lot of ways. And instead of kind of brushing it off, just being like, okay, this is what we can do better. And I'm sorry. And I thought that was really great.
Thank you. Alejandra.
Good morning, everyone. I recently finished Rooted in the Earth, Reclaiming the African American Environmental Heritage. And it's this book that talks about the Black experience and nature connection, land history from different perspectives, and just kind of overturns concepts of what meaningful connections in the outdoors looks like. It is a little bit of a heavy read, but I would definitely recommend it all to you.
Thank you. And Maximo.
Good morning, everyone. I was had the good fortune of being able to attend a webinar recently about how to continue the ongoing efforts to make recreation programming more equitable. And there was a presenter there, Sarah Sinclair, who had just referenced in her talk her book, How We Go Home, and it's voices from Indigenous North America. It's first-person stories here, and so was very moved by her presentation, and so jumped right on and got the book. So that's what I've been reading recently.
Thank you, Maximo. Lauren.
Morning, Paul. I listened to this podcast that I really liked, which was, it's a TED Talk, How to Citizen. Baratunde Thurston he's a comedian, American comedian and writer. He's very funny, but he was very hopeful about looking at citizen as a verb instead of a noun. And so it was really interesting, giving us different mechanisms to construct positive change and hopeful change instead of destructive change. So I thought that was great. On the flip side, I also am a Disney fan and I love the Raya and the Last Dragon that just came out for fun.
Good to sort of balance things out that way. That's great. Kyle.
Yes, good morning. So I'm a member of a local mountaineering club called the Mazamas, and I happened to be at the Mazama Mountaineering Center last week and was thumbing through some of their history. And what struck me was some of the early climbs of like Mount Baker and Mount Hood, how with minimal equipment and gear, and also just really tough conditions, these climbers were able to, get these summits, sometimes like bushwhacking for 20 miles, 30 miles, or, trying to get to government camp in a Model T on dirt roads that, are basically driving over logs. And it makes me feel a little bit guilty now, when I go just drive up to Timberline Lodge and start climbing from there. But it was remarkable to me and inspiring just how resilient the human spirit can be, and just the physical abilities that people can bring forth when they set their mind to it.
Thank you for sharing that. Britta.
Good morning, everyone. I'm assuming I joined a little late, but I'm assuming we're talking about what we're reading right now. So I just started a new book. It's called Daring to Lead, or Dare to Lead, I think. And it's by a lady called Brene Brown. I think by training, she's a psychologist, therapist. And the premise of this book is that leading really means taking responsibility. More than anything, it's not like, who has power. It's more about like who wants to stand in and actually do some hard work. And I'm finding it pretty fascinating because, one of the things is you ask questions. You don't assume that you know. And anyway, that's where I'm at right now.
Thank you. All righty. So moving to business, we'd like to review and approve the March minutes. So do I have any questions or comments on those minutes? And if not, does someone want to move to approve those minutes?
I would move approval as written.
Thank you, Patty. And a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, David. All right, then we'll vote on the minutes as they were recorded for March. All in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
And any opposed? All right, thank you. It is time for Adina's report.
Thank you, Paul. That was a really lovely icebreaker activity. I really appreciated it. I'm sorry I was so uninspired and uninspiring in my participation, but I really I jotted down the name of a couple of the books that folks were reading. They sound great. Thank you. In addition to our having a few openings on the Parks Board, we have some other opportunities for community involvement that I wanted to talk about. We're seeking a Parks Board representative to join the Mill Park Project Advisory Committee. That PAC will provide input to the Bureau and the design team in the development of the final design for Mill Park in East Portland. The park, for those of you who don't know, is located at Southeast 117th Avenue and Mill Court next to the Mill Park Elementary School. And it's about just under 6 acres in size. Currently, it has an informal soft surface walking trail, open lawn, and mature trees, but otherwise it's undeveloped. So it'll be a great project to get into if someone's interested. There was a master plan that was created in 2017, so the improvements will be guided by that. But again, it's a nice opportunity to be a part of planning a park from the beginning, as it were. The time commitment will include attending 5 evening meetings between May and February of next year. If you're interested, Maya Spencer, our community engagement coordinator, is accepting applications through the end of April. And when Brooke sends out the minutes, she can include Maya's contact information. We also have the Levy Oversight Committee application has been extended until April 22nd. I understand that Juan has applied to serve on the committee, so thank you, Juan, for that. I'd like to encourage the rest of the board to continue to share this opportunity with your networks. Speaking of the levy, announcement that we've hired a woman named Claire Flynn, who will be joining the Sustainable Future team on March 18th. I'm sorry, she already did on March 18th as the levy coordinator. Claire will be working closely with the Levy Oversight Committee and will be working closely with Sarah Huggins to ensure that the Parks Levy is on course to deliver transparently and effectively on the ballot measure that the Portland voters passed last November. So Claire was born and raised in Southeast Portland, but we lured her over from the East Coast because for the last few years, she's been based in Washington, D.C., where she received a master's in environmental science and policy from Johns Hopkins University, and she worked for the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, most recently as a conservation program manager in the Northeast region. We're really excited to have her join the team. I finally got to meet her yesterday at a meeting, and I'm sure several of you will meet her at some point. Also, Ron Hughley is joining us as the new raceway manager at Portland International Raceway. So he started just last week, April 8th. Ron is a native Oregonian. He was born and raised in Hillsborough, and he's been participating in racing events at PIR since he was 16 years old. So he's sort of coming back home. He's been involved in motorsport racing and maintenance for most of his life, including as an event manager with the Great American Stock Car Series and as a composite tool manufacturer for race cars here in Portland. Most recently, he served as the curator for the World of Speed Motorsports Museum in Wilsonville. Did not even know that that existed until I saw his resume. So that'll be a place to go visit. And where he established nationally recognized exhibits and events. So we're very happy to welcome Ron, or welcome him back, I guess. Within urban forestry, Julie Fiduca is now a supervisor. So she was just promoted, her working title is supervising tree technician. She's been with the urban forestry team since 2015, and she's served in several different positions. And so we're really excited to have her be elevated within that work unit. She's lovely to work with. And I think Tim will be announcing a new community engagement manager soon. So I don't want to preempt that. I think think he's going to do an announcement soon, hopefully. I wanted to give a quick update on Healthy Parks, Healthy Portland framework. Since we've last met, we've been working to align Bureau-wide projects to make sure that we understand all critical path dependencies and meet our promises to the voters about the use of the levy resources. We're tracking projects related to larger Bureau planning. For example, the refresh of our mission, vision, values, strategic objectives, performance measures, and critical policy like cost of service. We're also tracking planning items such as budget management, levy management, ramp up of our programs and services for summer and beyond, and of course, our organizational ramp up. We've been piloting the use of Smartsheet to bring project plans managed by various people in the Bureau together so that the leadership team can track progress and make decisions or trade-offs as needed. It's a work in progress, but a big step forward for us to have all of these major projects in one place tracked in real time. We have also hired consultants to help us in our Healthy Parks, Healthy Portland planning efforts. We are excited to work with Future Work Design. They are a certified women and minority-owned business. They will help us with the refreshing of our mission statement, our vision statement, and our values, and take our first steps towards creating strategic objectives for the Bureau. We had a kickoff meeting with them just last week on April 6th, and we'll be co-creating our planning process with them this month. And we look forward to sharing information about this work at an upcoming board meeting. We'll put, I'll put the website to the consultants in the chat, or maybe I'll ask Brooke if she can do that, if anybody wants to look them up. Also in early May, we will hold the 4th employee gathering where we will discuss our approach to developing a new mission, vision, and values for the Bureau and the role that staff will play. And of course, we're always really excited to get to hear how staff, to get staff feedback. So there are a lot of moving parts and pieces to all this work, but I'm really excited to finally dig in. I know that the board's been waiting with bated breath to jump into some long-term visionary planning with the Bureau. So we're really excited to get that moving. Just a quick update that you all probably saw in the news because we got an enormous amount of coverage about it. On April 7th, City Council unanimously voted to add up to $1.4 million in one-time funding to our Ranger program, and that's effective immediately. The funding is part of a larger package to enhance community safety in Portland, and it includes realignment of PPB resources. It adds money to the Office of Violence Prevention, and it also provides grants to community groups, to name a few. You know, the investment in community safety does not fundamentally change the Ranger program. They will still have the same job and the same mandate to make parks a positive place to be, educate visitors when they violate park rules, and of course to refer crimes and threats to Portland Police Bureau. So basically this will be, the result will be more Rangers in more parks, making more positive connections than ever before. And we're really excited. And I also want to thank, since Vicente is on the line, I want to thank Vicente and his peers, Victor Sanders and Sofia Camaño, excuse me, and Xavier Camaño. Why do I always mess that up? Sorry, Vicente. For their leadership in creating this program and for getting it passed at council. Vicente spoke very articulately and at the council hearing. I'm really proud of the park rangers and I'm really excited to see them grow. As many of you know, I started my parks career as a ranger, so I'm a little bit biased. For shelter to housing, I wanted to give a quick update. On March 31st, City Council extended the city's housing emergency declaration for another year and waived portions of the Portland zoning code. Also on March 31st, they amended the original shelter to housing project proposal with additional language that removed parks and natural areas from being considered for temporary outdoor shelters during times outside of a declared emergency. While indoor shelters will remain an option during times of emergency and other times of need, like weather and air quality events, it is expected that City Council will have a final vote on April 14th to adopt the new code updates. I want to thank the board for being really responsive and for their support and communicating with the council about your concerns about the code. Also, as a point of interest, the ability to site temporary shelters in parks has been an option since the state of emergency on housing and homelessness was initially enacted in 2015. And Parks will work with the commissioner to review any proposed temporary shelters that in parks that come down the pike because of this change, especially within the next year. As you know, Charles Jordan, Mount Scott, and East Portland community centers have been used as temporary shelters over the last year. But I am very happy to announce that these shelter services will close this month, and this spring and summer, we will be opening those community centers to support public recreation opportunities. So we were happy to be able to step up and be a part of the solution in a temporary way, especially given COVID. But the staff was very excited to get back into their community centers and do their work. So that is my report. And just wanted to see if anyone had any questions for me or for the staff.
Thank you, Adina. Other questions?
Yeah,
I think
I have one quick question with the Rangers, the addition of the Rangers. If that funding was a one-time allocation, what happens when that money is spent?
Yeah, so we're going to be hiring about 24 seasonal rangers with the funds, as well as likely renting vehicles and purchasing equipment and supplies for those rangers. And they will be seasonal. Now, we haven't made a decision about how we're using the levy funds for the ranger program as yet, but generally, and we hire seasonals every year and they work for different amounts of time. So they would either be laid off or be continued depending on what we do. There's also obviously an opportunity for the city council to make a decision about funding, increasing that fund to increasing our general fund to support that that staffing beyond the 9 months. But it's a little premature to talk about that yet.
Thanks.
And just to follow up to thank you, that was a good question and a great response, Adina. What metrics are going to be in place to help assess the add that the additional rangers bring to the city, and then to help make a decision about continuing or either full-time or seasonal staffing? I'm just curious about how you're going to try to evaluate it.
Well, I'm going to kick that question to Vicente because the Rangers are employing a new tool that will help them measure their productivity. And you're absolutely right. It's very important that we be very clear about the impacts of the Rangers. Vicente, do you want to answer that?
Thank you, Director Long. So the tool that Director Long mentioned is ArcGIS Quick Capture. And it's a mobile tool that rangers will use to track their daily activities, their patrols of parks, be able to report and have a dashboard in real time where our internal staff can review what's happening in parks, from the contacts each and every contact ranger makes, what citations or enforcement steps they've taken in each park. A part of this proposal as well will be us aligning with the community partners that are also receive funding for this program. So we'll be making connections to make sure that we're reporting this data to those community partners in hopes that it will at large be a measuring stick on how this impacted the reduction of violence that is occurring in parks. As we all know, when we activate parks with activity, such as recreation, and when they do their programming parks, it helps reduce violence overall or negative interactions overall in parks. So we look to do that with the proactive patrols of rangers to make sure that they're out there making those connections with the community so that the community feels safe to be in our public spaces.
Terrific. Thank you, Vicente. That sounds like a really thoughtful approach to showing the value that the program will add. And similar to Adina, I was a park ranger for Connecticut State Parks between my sophomore and junior years of being in college. So I have roots into being a park ranger as well. All right. Well, thank you for that excellent report. And now we've got a presentation. I'm sure some of you have read in the paper about the issue with the DEQ fine for the Forest Park trailhead. And so to help explain that and sort of untangle it, it's a bit of a complicated story. We've got both Kyle DeHart and Britta Herwig to lead us through that.
Okay, so I'm going to attempt to share my screen. I put a little PowerPoint together to help everyone follow along. I don't think I've done a share screen on Zoom before, so hopefully it's the same as it is on Teams. Share. Can you all see my presentation screen?
Yes.
All right, that's outstanding. So again, hello everyone. This is Britta Herwig. I'm project manager with the Capital Growth team, and Forest Park Entry is my project. It's been my project for a number of years. I inherited the project in 2017 and moved it forward diligently. Okay, why is it not forwarding? That's weird. How do I make it move? Ah, here we go. Okay, a little background. The project is located at the border of Forest Park. It is mentioned specifically, the site is mentioned specifically in the Forest Park Natural Resources Management Plan, which is the document that is guiding all the development in Forest Park. It is mentioned in that plan as a potential entrance site to Forest Park, and the project that's proposed there is a parking lot, trailhead, park access project. So there's a location is Highway 30 at the intersection of Kittredge and St. Helens and Highway 30. It's a very busy intersection, and the site itself is about 3 acres, I think, 3.5 acres, and it was an industrial site. It has had industrial uses in the past, and it is zoned industrial, or it was at the time when the project started. It was zoned heavy industrial. It is in a industrial sanctuary, and it's also partially in an environmental overlay zone. So it's a very intriguing site. It's one of its many intriguing points. Let's see, what else do I want to say about the site? So the program, like I said before, there's a little map, includes a vehicular entry, park sign, pedestrian entry, a parking lot for about 30 cars. And when we started the project, it included also the potential for a handicap accessible trail that would just climb up the mountain. The site is very steep, as Forest Park climbs very steeply there in this location. So it's really hard to access Forest Park if you need any sort of mobility assistance. And the goal was to create a trail that would at least get you part of the way there. We also added a nature center building, an educational building, to help educate people about Forest Park, the stewardship aspects of Forest Park, to provide a community space for people to get together, and to provide a, now it's kind of funny to say this, sort of a virtual entrance to Forest Park. The recognition is that, Forest Park has so many entrances, there can't be just one, but there needs to be a place where people who don't know Forest Park can come to become familiar with this large natural resource. So that was the That was the program. Now, as I said before, the site was an industrial site, and with the industrial use comes unfortunately also a residual bit of contamination. We purchased the site in two different purchase agreements, and both purchasing processes included cleanup, significant cleanup actually. And then we entered in, so we did this in 2005 and 2009 respectively. And in 2014, most of the cleanup was completed, and we entered into a consent decree or a consent order with DEQ that basically stipulated that we could develop our desired park program. At the time, it was just a trailhead and parking lot and an access trail. We could develop this program, but we had 5 years to do it till 2019, and we needed to make certain stormwater control improvements, as well as some the parking lot essentially was agreed upon as a means to kind of control some of the residual contamination of PCBs. That's what we're talking about here on the site, so that none of the contamination that was still there, which is not harmful to humans at all, it's below most thresholds, but there's a stormwater connection to the Portland Harbor, which of course is a Superfund site, and we needed to, make sure that we aren't contributing to that situation. So that is the agreement that we signed. We did not have funding. We allocated funding in 2015, 2017, and again in 2018. We had a total budget of $4.3 million. 1.5 of that was a grant from the state of Oregon, from the Parks Department. We embarked on the project, which the program I shared with you already, and spent significant time on community engagement to come up with a design that met most needs and desires. There's pretty strong opposition to developing that site from a pretty large group of people. We had to go because we're in an environmental overlay zone. Once we had a design that was agreed upon, we had to go through an environmental land use review. That review took 3 years. It was appealed, and we finally got a decision last summer. And now also in 2020, we adjusted the scope of the project from including a nature center and pathways up the hill into Forest Park to just the original idea from the 1990s, a trailhead and a parking lot and park access. We are currently in a permitting, the last site development and some other permit phase. We're hoping to bid the project here real soon and then start construction. And sometime between the end of the year and next spring, we're going to have all of the improvements complete. Now, the DEQ component of this project was, like I said, there's a consent order that we signed in 2014. And when we realized that the project was much more involved than we had anticipated, and we didn't have the full funding to do everything we wanted, we requested from DEQ in 2019 an extension. To that, they responded with a warning letter saying you need to be done by 2019. And then in 2020, they issued, at the end of 2020, they issued a pre-enforcement notice. All this time in between when they issued a warning letter and then the pre-enforcement letter, we continued to push the project forward as fast as we could, given all of the, the permitting requirements, the land use, everything that we had to go through in order to build the project. We adjusted the scope so that permitting became a little bit easier. And then in the beginning of this year, we received the notice of enforcement, that's what made it into the paper. They proposed a $448,000 fine, which since then, we've had several conversations with them, and now we're talking about a just under $20,000 fine that we can convert into a a project, an environmental project, if we can complete the stormwater controls that are required in the consent order by the end of this year. So here's where we are right now. We're going through the site development permit, which we need in order to, it's a code requirement. We need it in order to start construction or construct a project of that size. We're also needing a public works permit because we are having to do work in the adjacent right-of-way. DEQ is requiring us to do a site-specific 1200C permit that we're working on right now. And I just heard yesterday that hopefully we'll be able to achieve this or get approval for that permit in the next 2 months. Then we have to bid the project. It's going to be about a $2.5 million, hopefully, construction project. So we have to bid it, formally bid it. We have to go through the contracting process with the city. And then construction, we think it can be a 6 months project. And of course, you know, there has to be a successful bidder, it has to meet our budget requirements, and we have to have good weather to do construction. We're thinking that some of the landscape work will probably not be finished by the end of the year, but I think that's fine. And then final completion, hopefully next summer when it dries up again. That is what I have to present to you. And I can stop sharing so that you guys can all see each other. Questions?
Thank you, Britta. It was a good presentation. I appreciate the timeline.
A few clarifying questions, just so that I understand it right. I guess my first question is just when you said the purchase included significant cleanup by parks or cleanup by the, was there some kind of agreement that the people you were purchasing it from were going to clean it up?
So this was before I got there, but my understanding is that yes, it was, you know, in a prospective purchaser agreement, we agreed to purchase the site if it was cleaned up to a certain point. So my belief is, and maybe Kyle knows better, that most of the cleanup happened before we took possession of the site.
So yeah, about 640 tons of PCB contaminated soil was removed from the property by the former property owner, Anderson Property or Anderson Brothers or something to that effect. But there, you know, were still residual hits for PCBs, you know, relative like low levels, like Britta mentioned, below human health risk thresholds for occupational exposures. And even residential exposures for short duration. And it was important though that those residual PCBs were controlled because of the stormwater conveyance and its association with the Portland Harbor project. So most of the contamination was removed before we entered into the agreement. A lot of it was, but not all of it, which is common.
Okay, thank you. My next question is just, you mentioned that there was significant community engagement and opposition, which is maybe one reason the timeline is taking a long time. I'm just curious about what the opposition is, like who's that coming from?
So there, without going into too much detail, there's, I think there was maybe some confusion in the beginning about whether or not this site was part of Forest Park and was as such a natural part of a natural resource. And you know, the reality is that it was an industrial site and zoned industrial. It's adjacent to Forest Park, so it's not within the boundary of Forest Park, which is guided by the Forest Park Natural Resources Management Plan. So there was some tension between conservation and restoration of a perceived, you know, sort of original natural resource versus the restoration or improvement of a pretty contaminated, you know, industrial site. That was one thing. And then the other thing was that the idea of having a structure there, a nature center there, was also not something that everyone was prepared for. And there were lots of questions around what would this building do? What would be the impact of this building be on Forest Park? Why would we build it there? So we spend significant time on that. And then there was a large part of the conversation, I think that was necessary. You know, we didn't have funding for an entire program that we had envisioned. So there was also a perception that Forest Park is really a park that is, while it is a citywide natural resource and a parks resource as well, that it was a resource really for the West Side citizens and not for the East Side citizens. So we spent a lot of time on outreach to communities on the East Side, you know, trying to understand, would they come to Forest Park? What would it take for them to get to Forest Park? What were some of the barriers that keep them from reaching Forest Park? You know, physical barriers, transportation barriers, but also cultural barriers. And we wanted to do a good job of making that a resource for everyone.
My final just clarifying question is around the removal of the, actually, I remember maybe a year or two ago, someone talked about this nature center here to this board. I just want to clarify that it almost seemed like the removal of the nature center, what's the cause of that? Is that budget or is it to speed up the process? I just wasn't clear when you were talking about how the reason for the adjusting of the scope of the project.
Yeah, so to be clear, we're not removing it. Maybe I said that, I misspoke. We phased the project. So we still have this overarching program because all the things we said about Forest Park needing some sort of a gateway and some sort of a meeting point for everyone, that's all still true. We removed it from the initial project, because we never were able to get the $20 million of funding that we needed. And then also because in order to satisfy the requirements that DEQ had for the construction timeline, and when we realized that they were not budging on, you know, the construction timeline, we just needed to remove it from this phase 1 effort so we can meet as best as we can that goal.
Thank you. Yeah, that clarifies all my questions. Thanks.
Any other questions? Okay, well, thank you, Britta and Kyle. We appreciate your information and glad to get the update. All right, that brings
Absolutely,
us to,
thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. That brings us to the working group reports. And first up is Tamara with the Community Engagement Working Group report.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. Just briefly, I think it was early March, we met with leadership, so Adina, Kenya, and Tim, and Paul and Bonnie to discuss the proposal we had written up. And so we're still just kind of processing some of that feedback. We did connect with prospective members just to share a little bit about our experience there. And then we're just kind of processing next steps. So that's where we're at with the proposal. And yeah, I want to definitely thank the members who gave feedback along the way and drafting that. I think it's definitely come a long way.
So I have a question, Tamara, in terms of the feedback was pretty specific from the Bureau leadership and from Bonnie and myself. And wondering, you know, as you referenced processing the feedback, where are you at in that process? Have you met since the 3rd of March to debrief that? And what's your schedule for pulling a second draft together?
We have had ongoing discussions again with the prospective members and then also Alejandra Pinay and I. There is no specific timeline. I think, again, with your specific and broader feedback, that it was a lot to kind of digest and think about. And so I think that there's still some conversations to be had.
I'm going to lean in as chair and make a suggestion that this effort could benefit from a regularly scheduled meeting to help you process the information. other working groups have a standing meeting. It's not used every month, but it's there as structure. And I think that discipline would be helpful to advance this. I know that there is a range of thinking about what this work represents, and I'd like to encourage us to align ourselves with the Bureau's wishes here. If I put myself in Kenya's role, he has a very challenging role for the Bureau to help reduce and eventually eliminate the vestiges of racism for this Bureau. And, you know, there's a lot of structural racism, and that's a big task. And he's capable of taking that on, and we want to support him in that. And from my perspective, the board really should be supporting the Bureau's efforts here and seeing ourselves well aligned with the Bureau's equity statement. So I'd like to ask Tamara and Aaron to schedule a monthly meeting and begin digging in on that, and invite the full working group to help you with that.
I can connect with Aaron offline then about that. Appreciate the suggestion, Paul. And I'll just be, connecting with some folks offline. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Sounds good. Okay.
All right, let's move to Mike and the Financial Sustainability Group.
Yeah. Thanks, Paul. So on March 25th, the Bureau submitted its spring bump proposal. There's a work session, I think it's today, to discuss that, and a council hearing on April 21st to move that forward. Nothing terribly unusual or material, I think, being requested from Parks. One exception is Parks is requesting to move about $550,000 from an unemployment contingency fund to cover some very unusual high unemployment costs this year. It's my understanding that typically unemployment costs are about $200,000 a year, and this year it's over 1.4 million. So that's the reason for the dip into the contingency reserves. As far as projections for the rest of the year, Parks is expecting to spend all of its general fund discretionary allocation. Earned revenues tracking right on about with what was planned. There's some variances, both positive and negative, but they kind of balance each other out. As far as levy spending is quite a bit lower than what was conservatively budgeted for the year. Parks is projecting about a $1.5 million levy spend for the rest of the fiscal year versus the $9 million that was budgeted. So that's a materially lower spend so far in this fiscal year on levy. I touched last meeting on golf. Golf continues to perform really well. They'll have about a $2 million increase in their balance, which is great because that helps them build their operating reserves for years when the weather is bad, and also to fund a capital improvement plan. And speaking of operating reserves, on the other side of it, PIR is continuing to operating at a loss, which isn't a big surprise given COVID, but they have reserves that are sufficient to get them through this fiscal year. And hopefully into next year when things will start to normalize a little bit more. So that shows the value of the reserves. As far as budgeting for next fiscal year, the mayor's proposed budget is expected to be released at the end of the month. We really don't know if they're going to, if it's going to follow all the CBO recommendations or not. So we'll find that out. And then Parks is currently designing their fall bump process, which is going to be informed by Healthy Parks, Healthy Portland. That's obviously in the early stages, so I'll be reporting back on that in future meetings. That's it.
Thank you, Mike. All right, Patty's up next with the land use and infrastructure.
Thank you, Paul. Well, we meet regularly 1 week ahead of the planning board meeting. And this last time we touched on 5 of the topics on our rolling agenda. The first one is S2HC, which is the on which Adina had covered earlier, so I won't say much about it, except that the letter that we drafted to the mayor and commissioners was very successful in getting that exception to allowing housing in parks, including parking lots in parks. So thank you to Paul and others who helped write that letter. The second item is Chapman and Lonsdale squares are both going to be upgraded, and in fact the fences went up yesterday. I think there's 2 weeks of work ahead to really upgrade those parks after the pummeling they got through the demonstrations of 2020. So that will be an important bit of brightening up downtown, I think. Third item was the Forest Park entry, which Britta has just very ably described, so I won't say anything more about that. Fourth, South Parks and the continuation of the Green Loop and the application for historic designation of South Park blocks. That's moving along. It's all a little bit murky, but we'll have a clearer presentation for you next time, I think. Tate White is tracking that and has been keeping us up to date. And then finally, lighting in Grants Park. There has been, I think, a lack of effective communication between the various parties involved, which has led to some misunderstandings about who's listening to whom. But I think that's sorted out again. A lot of it is being funneled through PPS, since they own the high school, obviously. There's a lot of concern about the lighting and who can use it and when they can use it. But without going into detail, I think all of that is getting sorted out, and the peace is being declared between the neighborhood association and the other participants. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Go ahead, Lauren.
Over to you, Paul. I'm not hearing him.
Thanks, Patty. So I just wanted to clarify that for Chapman Lonsdale, it will probably not be finished until late June, maybe even into July. There's a lot of work to do, especially on the restrooms there. So I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
Thank you. And thanks to Patty. Okay, Bonnie, any updates on the process improvement ad hoc?
There's no new update at this time. As I reported last month, we are awaiting some operational issues, mostly on BES's side. But staff is aware that we would like to stay involved in that process to ensure that that the bureaus can work together more efficiently. So as I get more information, I'll report back to you here.
Thank you, Bonnie. And then Alejandra to update us on if there's anything in addition to what Tamara shared about the affirmation of.
Hi, Paul. Yes, I am still in the process of implementing those edits as well. So I don't have quite anything to share this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we will move to the nominating committees, and Aaron and Patty will lead that for us.
Yeah, so just a reminder for everybody, applications are due on April 26th. Brooke gave us a little update and they're rolling in. So thank you to those of you who have been sharing this with your peers and with people that you think might have an interest and be be a good member of the Parks Board. And I'm happy also, I just want to add, if people want to direct anyone who has questions, like if you know someone that might be interested, but they want to learn a little more, I'm happy to talk to people as well, one-on-one, if that's, if that makes sense. Feel free to email, introduce them to me. And besides that, once the application closes, we'll be going through the process of reviewing those, doing the interviews, and we'll keep you all updated in the meantime. But yeah, and Adina just put in the chat, it's in social media. If you use social media, feel free to share. But I'm excited for this process. So we're doing good. April 26th, that's the deadline. Patty.
On officer nominations, we have, I think, a pretty good handle on who's going to do what. We have several positions yet to be confirmed, but certainly by the time of the retreat or before, we shall have a full slate. So we'll be able to give you a proper briefing then. Thank you.
Thank you, Aaron and Patty. Okay, so it's time for Randy's report on the Portland Parks Foundation.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Couple of things to report. We are going to have our spring summit. Sorry, I'm manipulating my computer screen here. We're going to have our spring summit most likely on May 26th. We're still waiting for confirmation from the commissioner's office of whether she can make that date. Might alternatively be May 27th, and we're going to be honoring our founding board chair, Joey Pope, and we have an exciting announcement about and from her. And we'll also be honoring our Parks champions. We had over 40 nominations for that, and they each, we picked 2 winners, and they each get $1,500 to give to the Parks organization of their choice. And so it's kind of celebratory spring, yay, volunteerism and Parks organizations. And we're at work planning the fall conference, which will again be more based in inspiration and technical assistance. So we have a great steering committee who's working on that. We're still soliciting small grants applications. So if you know any small organizations who could use a little bit of a lift, send them to our website. And we upped the amount we're giving away this year to $20,000 to kind of match our 20th anniversary. And we'll be sort of kicking off all of that with the May Summit. The big project that is occupying a lot of my time, most of my time actually, is Paseo, which I think I walked you through. I can't remember though, I've done this presentation so many times, it's blurry in my mind. Did I show you guys visuals last time? Did I show you a deck? Paul, do you remember?
I don't remember seeing a deck of slides.
Okay, some people, Bonnie's shaking her head yes.
Oh.
Okay, well I'm gonna go up to the deck, and I'll just cut through to the chase of kind of where we're at on it, to give you kind of a sense of exactly what we're doing, or as exact as we can be at this point. This is very much building the airplane as it runs down the as it runs down the, well, the other a metaphor or analogy that I've used, it's like trying to launch a 767 off of a aircraft carrier. But we have a great event planner, and the basic idea is that we are going to do a linear festival along the park blocks in August. We are hoping for 3 consecutive Saturdays, which everybody would like to do, but that's like doing 3 separate festivals. So we will have to see how much money we can raise in a very short amount of time. And the idea is that we're taking a walk together, but we're also making a walk together. And so to that end, just to give you the high points, as I said, along the park blocks, it'd be food and artisan markets and music and performance and installations and ideas. These would be primarily pop-up performances. If we have an opportunity to do a stage, we'll probably do a small stage, but we're not going to do any sort of main stage kind of thing. It's very flexible as needed for social distancing, whatever the guidelines are. And we're, really working hard to make this inclusive, diverse, and authentic, and, kind of active civic reimagination on the blocks. And of course, it's our 20th anniversary, so this is sort of our gift to the city. Our second scenario would be to do 3 consecutive days in August, and more conventional sort of festival. But I think everybody agrees it would be nice to animate the downtown, or at least this section of downtown on Saturday nights. So this is a sort of a concept map, because it's 1.2 miles, and so how do we break it down? How do we keep people moving and understanding where they need to go? And we're also building upon work that's being done by PBOT and Prosper, and some other sort of platforms that we're building upon. So I'll just walk you through it real quick, going from PNCA and the North Park blocks, which Prosper is working on several things. There's going to be a bike lane with the new Flanders Street Bridge. And PBOT has already vacated this stretch of Flanders, and there's going to be a mural that's going to be there. And then Vanport Mosaic, there's almost every storefront is empty on the North Park blocks right now. And so Prosper, Michelle Comer, working as consultant for Prosper and formerly of Travel Portland, is working with Vanport Mosaic to do a history exhibit in those storefronts, a community history exhibit. And if you don't know Vanport Mosaic, they're a really awesome group, that has done really, really deep community history around Vanport, but they do all kinds of community history. And so that should be really interesting. And that, and then of course, with the playground there and the bocce ball courts and the basketball courts, we feel like this will be a great place for, sort of family, the family phase of the Paseo. We still have high hopes that Culinary Corridor will get moving. Had a good showing of that last night at City Council, and it seems like the commissioners are really on board with it. So that would help. That would essentially allow the cleanup and programming around Ankeny West, which is quite a place right now. Parks has been cleaning up on a regular basis, but it's a sad place, and it's a tough part of town with all the telco buildings, empty telco buildings, and then just empty buildings around it. So it would really help to bring that node to life just for the city in general, let alone for Paseo. But Paseo gives a deadline, so we're hoping we can meet that. And then another node is obviously Director Park, and then Portland Art Museum will be, and PBOT are going to be vacating Madison in this stretch. And so this will become a plaza, and we're sort of calling that the Justice and Culture Plaza. So we're working with a number of social justice groups, and we're hoping we can kind of animate that. The monuments are there. Converge 45 and the Portland Art Museum, or I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute, what they're working on. And then of course it's PSU's 75th anniversary, and so they're working on some stuff around creative placemaking up there. And then these sections, the blue sections, are connectors, and so those are more passive experiences. So they might be like poetry banners, or it could be a hall of murals from downtown, because there's all these wonderful murals that we don't know what's going to exactly happen with them yet. And there's also a lot of empty storefronts and just empty wall space around there. So we're working with our sort of curatorial group to imagine those spaces. So we working with Converge 45 and Urbanism Next and RAC and the Portland Art Museum, we have convened a couple of lectures. The first with Liz Ogbu, who's a spatial justice activist and designer, happened a couple of weeks ago. We had 900 registrants for that. And it was a fantastic lecture. You can see it on our website. Manuel Padilla from Oregon Solutions was the interlocutor and just did a marvelous job. And it goes for 2 hours, but it actually gets better toward the end. So it's almost worth just fast forwarding. We're trying to do a sort of highlights clip to put out, but we haven't got that done yet. And then next Tuesday, Paul Farber and an artist whose name has suddenly flown out of my mind, will be talking at noon. And they're a really interesting group called the Monument Lab out of Philadelphia, who has been, the Mellon Foundation gave them this massive $4 million grant to develop a definitive audit of the nation's monuments, and then some sub-grants to open 10 Monument Lab field stations. And so they're going to be talking about their work, which is really about new activations of civic memory. And so very, very prescient, conversation to be having, right now. And then both Converge 45 and us are convening these think tank conversations, which is kind of what's next. So we hear an inspirational lecture. How can we kind of bring this down to the ground here? So we've started our think tanks around the festival. And so we've brought together 15 participants from the community and are paying them stipends to help us sort of think through how the festival can best connect to their communities. It's a great group from We All Rise and Friends of Noise and The Numbers, and Young, Gifted, and Black, Albina Vision, Music Portland, Pitch Black, Don't Shoot, Portland Street Alliance, PICA, and then a number of very well-connected individual artists from different cultural backgrounds. And so we're having a second think tank on that tonight, and we'll see where things go. So it's a super fun project to be working on, and also a very scary one because it's such a short timeline. And I'm happy to, let's see, that's the last of my slides. So I'll take down the screen share and happy to answer any questions. I see Lauren has her hand up.
Thanks, Randy. Are you working with PNCA too? We've had some conversations with PNCA about that, about the lot.
Yeah, I've had one conversation, and I know that Michelle Comer is working with them, so I'm going to circle back with Darby there to see kind of where they're at.
Yeah.
I know they have some, they're in this kind of weird space with their merger, and budgets are sort of a little bit locked up, and so we want to help them do something. And I have a potential funder, I think, who would step up for that.
Okay, thanks.
So if you do have any issues or need any assistance with PNCA, feel free to give me a holler.
Oh, are you on the board?
I'm emeritus on the board, and I was a former president.
Oh, okay.
So feel free to give me a holler.
Okay, will do.
But Darby is the right person to be working with.
Oh yeah, no, she's awesome. Yeah. So wish us luck. If this comes off, it's good. It's going to be like one of the coolest things Portland's seen. Certainly going to be a great morale lifter for, for the downtown and the city in general. Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Randy. I appreciate. I've been in the land use working group, so we'll see. But it was a good presentation. And yes, downtown needs a lot of love right now. So this is a great step forward to making that happen. Okay. We've touched on previously a little bit of the Shelter to Housing Continuum letter, which we've shared as part of the materials that everyone received. I really don't want to go through the letter itself other than to really explain that we, in this letter writing effort, we're really being advocates for parks in helping to shape policy that was very well intentioned, but we felt was not thoroughly thought through in terms of unintended impacts to parks that would occur as a result of making parks and parking lots to parks available to temporary housing. So that's the gist of the letter, essentially. And as was pointed out earlier, we were successful in helping the City Council change the ordinance to protect parks and open spaces. And we did that through the Land Use and Infrastructure Working Group, and drafted it, sent it around, made some changes, and then everyone who was comfortable with the letter signed off on it. So are there any questions on why we wrote the letter or what we intended to accomplish with it? Okay. Well,
Paul, I just want to add that, one of the things that I really wanted to emphasize in my suggested edits to the letter, which I believe you pretty much just accepted, was that I really wanted to emphasize the need for further analysis on the part of BPS in the context of, like any other use, like when they're evaluating what needs to be available for shovel-ready industrial sites, when they're evaluating what needs to be available for housing to support the community, like they're evaluating what needs to be available for retail commercial to support for those uses. That really we wanted them to do some more analysis in the context of, where are potential sites for these kinds of uses, and are those sites better served in terms of closer adjacencies to services that those folks might need, and those sorts of issues. Because I think that was one of the things that was of grave concern, was that the idea that, hey, this is publicly owned land, but didn't consider all the other both publicly and privately owned land, some of which may have structures on it, which could be converted to a temporary use. And so we really advocated for some more analysis in that regard. And I think that that's an important part of that, the gist of what I thought was important with respect to that letter. Because it's about serving our community.
That's really,
yeah, sorry,
that's
it's
really
about
true. And
serving all community members, housed, unhoused, and all land uses. Thanks.
Yeah, that was really true. Certainly, we understand the need for shelter for a lot of our fellow citizens. And we really thought, BPS has done an inventory, and we understood, and it's been verified that there is sufficient available land and properties that are more centrally located. Bonnie referenced services. The fact is that 60% of people who are houseless are there because of substance addictions or mental health issues. And those services aren't going to be found in Beggar's Take Park or nearby. There are going to be more available, like the ODOT blocks currently down by OMSI, where there's soup kitchens and other facilities nearby that provide food and medical attention and counseling and laundry and all these kinds of services that are part and parcel of serving people well who are without shelter currently. So yeah, we strongly encouraged the council and BPS to look at this harder, and appreciate the add-on, Bonnie. That was really helpful. Are there any questions from anyone else? Okay, we will move right along then. I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about our upcoming board retreat. So we had floated the notion of possibly doing it as an outdoor event. It's clear that the vaccination progress is not going to be as complete as we would need it to be to have us gather that way. So in rethinking that, one notion that I'd like to share with the board is it would be really nice. In previous years, we gathered the evening before the retreat and just had some really nice social time, sort of like we do at the beginnings of our meetings, just sort of connecting as people, as members of a community. And really, I personally really missed that last year by doing it completely virtually. So I'd like to float the notion that we consider those who are, feeling comfortable to do so, that we have some sort of social event outside in a park, just to kind of connect as parkies, as park board members. And then I don't want to, we all have our tolerance for Zoom, and more than 2 hours in a Zoom meeting gets really hard. So we've typically met for about half a day or a little bit longer in our retreats. I'd like to float the notion that maybe we meet a couple of times for a morning or an afternoon to complete the business of the retreat. That would include, reviewing our mission, going over our bylaws again, making sure that everyone's dialed in terms of our responsibilities, welcoming our new members, celebrating our departing members. There's a lot of pieces to the board that are business, of course, but really wanting there to be this continued development of this community of people that are advocating for parks for the city of Portland and the region. So that's the intention that I'd like to set for our retreat. And I'd like to have a little bit of conversation about what are people's reactions and thoughts in terms of how do we structure a retreat in the second year of the pandemic in a way that is productive and makes people feel safe.
I'll just add that I agree that doing anything more than a couple hours on Zoom is somewhat painful. So I think to the extent that it could be broken up into a couple different sessions, that would, at least for me, be the preferable way to do it.
Thanks, Mike, for breaking the ice and offering your input. So that I'd like to hear if other people concur with that, or what people are thinking or feeling about that.
I like the idea of a social pre-party event in a park. I would advocate that we have some sort of virtual option for those who aren't comfortable doing it in person. People have various reasons that they might not be comfortable doing so, and I think we should do everything we can to accommodate them.
Good. Alejandro, I see your hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. I agree with both the social part out in a park and then breaking down the retreat into 2 or more sessions. My one comment would be that if we break it down in multiple sessions, that we make sure we try to schedule it as close together as possible. I feel like we want to maintain momentum on any conversations that we're having, and the risk of losing that momentum when just scheduling 2 weeks apart, it's might not end up being that productive. So that's my little piece, little thought.
Hey, Paul, this is Juan.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. Yes, Juan.
Yeah, I would worry myself. Can you hear me? Yeah. I wouldn't want to be caught by the media as OHSU physician participates in a gathering and that becomes a super spreader. So probably most of you or some of you are vaccinated already, but I would be cautious about having any public official gathering and then having a few get sick and then be destroyed by the media. So I'm not sure I will be able to join any in-person meetings for the time being, at least public.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Juan. I just wanted to clarify that I would fully have us follow the CDC protocol. So we would be masked, even though we'd be outdoors.
Yeah,
we'd have to think it through, obviously.
If you do mask, social distance, small group, then that's the way to go.
Yeah, and we'll know better by next board meeting, how this is going in Oregon. So yeah, I mean, given that we spent time today talking about the press, about the DEQ fine, yes, we don't want to create any unforced errors. We just don't need to create more controversy about what we're doing or not doing as people representing the public interest. So I appreciate your sensitivity to the optics of that And yeah, we want to be smart about how we do it. I see Randy has his hand up.
Where are we at? And I can't remember what the maximum number is, like for, let's say, doing a volunteer event in a park or something like that. Is it, what are the limits now?
You know, off the top of my head, Randy, I don't know what those limits are right now. I don't know if Brooke or Adina can address that, or anyone else from the park.
Give me a minute. Give me a minute. I feel like it's,
Okay.
I feel like it's 100. I feel like we went up and then we went back down. Just give me a moment. And it actually, for outdoor special events, is different. Like, there's different categories. So like in events, it's for a certain number, but it's within the event space. So like, we just literally went through this because we were talking about permitting events at Waterfront Park. So it also depends on how you interpret the CDC guidelines, right? So, you know, maintenance of a green space would be different than an actual an event. So a volunteer event, right, would be different than the Blues Fest. So we'll get back to you on that.
Okay.
Yeah, it'd be good to kind of, well, I mean, you know, by next board meeting, as Paul says, you know, we'll should have more information, but, you know, maybe we can do something together, you know, if everybody's up for, you know, maybe a work party someplace, just be outdoors and, you know, can switch it up, have different conversations with, you know, each other. I mean, if other people are gathering in that format, it doesn't seem like it would preclude us from doing it.
Yeah, I like that notion of, you know, some service component, perhaps, you know, where we're pulling English Ivy or we're doing something useful to help improve the condition of our parks. I don't want to create a logistics headache for anyone in parks, but, you know, if that's something that we could do readily, I like that notion. Are there other thoughts or reactions in terms of having there be a service component to this retreat, social? I'll take that as no strong reactions one way or the other. And so, yes, I'll tentatively look at a couple of our blocks, you know, probably one day in the next, because Alejandro, clearly you've touched something important in terms of keeping the building and maintaining the sense of momentum. So typically the board meetings, for those of you who are new to the board, we're on a Friday. We'd meet, you know, about 9 o'clock. We'd work through a lunch and then continue a little bit into the afternoon. And so I think a couple of 2-hour sessions could work well. We might do that maybe an afternoon and then to the next morning, but, you know, give a little bit of breathing space in between. And we'll probably do a doodle poll or something like that to just get a sense of when people could have those couple 2-hour blocks available for them later in June. So probably from mid-June on is what we'd be looking at. So if anyone has any, I don't think we're really looking at much travel these days, but if anyone has any plans to be out of town, just let us know and we'll schedule around that. Are there other thoughts in terms of the retreat itself? I'd really like us to come back. We spent a lot of time last year. Pat Frobes was generous and after she left the board to help us update our bylaws. It'd probably be very worthwhile to spend a little bit of time reviewing those and then talking about what do we want to try and accomplish in the coming year. That's really the focus of what the retreats have been in the past. And, you know, address a variety of issues. You know, equity is going to be in the forefront for us. So that's clearly going to be a big part of our agenda.
Hey, Paul, I just looked at the CDC guidelines for small gatherings. This would qualify as a small gathering, and as long as we do it in a place where people can stay 6 feet apart and adhering to all the other safety guidelines, I think I think we should be okay from just following the CDC. Just to point that out.
I'll note also that the Oregon Health Authority guidelines, I think Tim just put them in the chat, and Vicente also put some additional information in the chat.
Oh, cool.
Thank you.
Paul, can I suggest something? I don't know what our timing is going to be like. I'll have to check with Nicola. She's project managing our Healthy Parks, Healthy Portland framework work. But there may be an opportunity for a touch point with the board for that work at the retreat, depending on the timing. So I'll put that out there. We'll have to circle back with her and with the consultants to see if that timing works. But at the very least, there might be something to report, an update to be able to report out.
No, that sounds great, Adina. Thank you. And clearly, after a year plus of addressing the pandemic, the notion of meeting again in person has a lot of, it raises people's anxiety in numerous ways. So clearly sensitive to that, really want this to be an event, the social event, of course, something that people feel safe in. So I do want to hear from folks, offline is fine. But yeah, we're getting used to going back to something that we haven't done for a while. So it's going to be different, especially knowing that there's a virus out there that can make people really, really ill. All right. Are there any other questions? I just wanted to touch at a very high level on the retreat this time, and we'll share a draft agenda, obviously, before we sit down and meet together. And then just moving into our agenda for May, are there any topics or suggestions that people would recommend for us to cover in our next board meeting? Well, we meet, Bonnie, Adina, Brooke, and I meet 2 weeks from tomorrow. So feel free to give us feedback between now and then, and we can incorporate that into the agenda for May. Are there any parting comments or thoughts before we wrap up for our April meeting? Randy, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I've gotten several calls about the trees being cut down along Nato Parkway and Waterfront Park, and I don't know if that's because they're diseased elms or if that's part of the Better Nato project. So just curious, figured maybe some others are too.
We did have Jen on the call. Here she is.
Yeah.
Hi, thanks for the question, Randy. That is part of Better Nato, and that project has been underway for, gosh, I'm going to say 1.5 years now. And unfortunately, there was no way to do what PBOT needed to do there in terms of the improvements and retain all of the trees involved.
Yeah, okay, great. I just wanted to have an answer when people ask me.
Yep, yeah. They could, any questions, please route them to trees@portlandoregon.gov or 503-823-TREE, and our tree techs can fill them in on all the details that they'd like.
Okay, thanks so much, appreciate it.
Thanks for the question, Randy. All right then, we will wrap up a little bit early again this time, and thank you all for participating today, and look forward to seeing you all next month. Take care.
Bye-bye.
You got a quick minute? Oops, she went away.
Yes.